Okay. We're blessed to have Ann Adams here. Ann Adams is one of those unique people who is actually a decision maker. I shouldn't call it a company. What should I call it?
We're a nonprofit agency.
Yeah, but it's a big agency. You deal primarily with?
Mostly disturbed children.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And so you don't actually act as an official, even though you have an LCSW.
Right.
You don't act as an official therapist there.
No.
Okay. So, but actually you do in a way.
In a way.
How does that work?
Well, actually, as I'm the campus director at an intermediate treatment center in Georgia, which is your next step down from intensive, children being in hospital. In fact, we usually get about half of our kids from the hospital as a step down. And what I do is go on the units. We have an admission unit, and I go on the unit and then teach the children the EFT whenever I possibly can. And then I go on the other units just sort of seeing what people are doing. And if a child's got a problem at the time, I deal with it right then.
The interesting thing, you and I had a number of discussions about this, but one of the interesting things about Ann is, while she's not really supposed to be a therapist, and it's a very conservative community, is it not?
Yes, it is.
Very
Cedartown, Georgia.
Cedartown, Georgia. Okay.
Right.
Very, very conservative community, and for her to bring this in there, you had, I mean, it takes a little chutzpah, if you will, if that's the right term, to do it. And secondly, you are a decision maker. You're the kind of person who's supposed to say no. Are you not?
Well, we do a lot of that.
The thing that I found fascinating about Ann, and one reason I asked her to do this is many of you know she has contributed many times to our EFT email list. Okay, and she has this delightful way of getting rapport with severely emotionally disturbed children. And if you can deal with these children, you can deal with anybody else. And it's a way of, it's a kind of a natural thing. It's a kind of thing you can pick up, but it's I don't know if you could teach it well, but you can get it by osmosis, if you will. And she has this unique personality, does that, and she's one of the higher ups in an organization, the kind of person that many of you would like to eventually try to knock on the door of to get them to make some decision about using EFT or not using it or whatever. And she walks that walk and walks in those steps, and she's the decision maker, so she knows what goes on there. And she's going to discuss not only emotionally disturbed children and how to introduce the EFT to it, but the institutional, how to get to them, and et cetera. Did I have that right?
Right, you have that right.
Okay.
You know, basically, I've been a bureaucrat for 30 years, and my friends and acquaintances are people like assistant superintendents of schools and juvenile judge and the Department of Family and Children's Services and those type folks. I know how they think. I know what they want. I know what they don't want.
She asked me to ask her one question before I got off the stage, which is kind of a segue. Let's see if I get this question right, okay? Okay. If we were on an elevator, and that's all the time we had, and I ask you to tell me, what's the right terms here, how do you deal with emotionally disturbed children with only given the time that we had in the elevator, what would the answer be? What would you say? How'd I do with the question?
You did good. I
did good. Well, I'm going to leave you with that. You can answer it.
I forgot.
You forgot? Okay. Well, we'll wait. Hand for Ann, please.
Let me start with my highly skilled, deeply therapeutic comment that I generally do when I go in the unit to talk with a child. Hi. Hi. I'm fine. Okay, in a nutshell, basically, and I really sat down and tried to say, well, what is it that I do that gets through to so many of these kids? And so I boiled it down to what is basically outlined in your handout. It's about respect in that child, no matter what his behavior is. It's about admiring their courage for living their life the best way they know how. It's about letting go of the outcome. It's about staying focused on that child, staying totally in the here and now. If you are totally in the here and now, there's not any judgment. Judgment's a history thing. And if you're right here, right now, there's not a judgment about that child. You've got to be creative in your ways that you're establishing rapport with the child and in your approaches in using EFT with a child or whatever else it is you decide that you want to do with it. You know, much of what's effective with children, and for that matter adults too, is to just be with that child, to be totally in the here and now, to be who you really are. That congruence of your thinking, feeling, doing, being is critical in that child assessing you as a safe person to deal with. Let me share with you that I've been just a little bit concerned about this presentation, and here are my very detailed notes about that. And what I'd like for you to notice is the difference that you feel when I am congruently with you as me in the here and now, and the difference that it feels to you when I go back to my notes. That's the difference that child feels when you're totally there in the here and now with them versus what am I going to do next? You know, have I got this? What's the right setup phrase? It's not about the right setup phrase. I get lots of emails from folks after my, well, not lots, but significant, it's a few, about my my write-ups, and frequently ask, you know, well, what was the setup phrase that you used there? That's a repetitive sort of question, and what I want to settle with you for here and now and forever is it's not about the right setup phrase. It's about that respect, admiring their courage, being in the here and now with totally who you are. If you're there, all of that knowledge, all that intuition, all the studying, all of who you are, everything you've got in your toolbox, it's going to come to you, sort of trusting in the wealth of the universe, so to speak. You know, I'm making a presentation, and I want to make sure that you get all the points that I have to offer. But in the therapy situation, the point is to let go of that outcome, to relax, to be there, to be who you are. You know, the children that I work with, should have got water without ice in it. Sorry about that. Another example of my adroitness in social situations. These children have huge amounts of inner static. Talked about having a bee in their nose. They got several bees in their nose. They've been stung so many times. On top of that, they swallowed a hornet's nest. Static is huge with these children. My purpose tonight is to show you that getting through to these kids is doable, that you can do this. And I will have failed, though, if all I've done is show you how creative Ann is, assuming you think that I want you to leave here thinking I can do this, that it's not so tough, that with this kid doing all these bizarre sorts of things, that, you know, I can reach him, I can get there. And so I want you, as we talk, to picture yourself using EFT with a child that you know in a situation that you are familiar with. You know, like I said, I'm a campus director at an intermediate residential treatment facility for kids. These children are multi-traumatized, multi-diagnosed, frequently multi-medicated. They've got multiple problems. It takes multiple agency support with these children and every multiple approach that you could think of to reach these kids. Let me tell you about Teddy, and just to show you the very simple way that I actually do this with kids. Teddy is one of too many kids in our world who are a victim of child abuse and neglect. Teddy spent about 2.5 years in our agency, and he made a lot of progress, and he was scheduled to leave on Friday. It's Wednesday morning. They called me about 8:30 asking for a seclusion order. Unfortunately, in our agency, we do have timeout rooms and seclusion rooms, and occasionally have to use them. Teddy, for the 3rd day in a row, had torn up the unit, torn up his room, refused to go to school, and today, which is what got the seclusion order, he had tackled and bit a staff person. So I walked over on the unit to see what was going on. I peer at the little bubble. There's little Teddy sitting right there in the back of the timeout room, screaming, cursing, using every name in the book. It's amazing the vocabulary these kids can have. So I kind of I've picked it up from them. So. I'll try not to use any of them. Okay, Teddy's really kind of cute, but he didn't look real cute that day. So he's sitting there, screaming, carrying on. I'm peering through there. Teddy. He looks up at me. You think you've been in seclusion long enough? Okay. It's okay. You scoot up against that wall. I'm going to open the door. I'm going to sit right here. I'm not stupid. This kid just tackled a staff and bit him. You want to keep some space there, okay? Teddy sits down. I open the door. I sit down. Teddy is not exactly known for his level of cooperation when he is upset. But he's looking at me and he's quiet. And I just say, tap right here, Teddy. I know this neat way to calm down kids quick. Teddy picks up his hand and he taps right here. Okay? Now when I went in there to sit beside, or not beside, but across from Teddy, Teddy had a particular posture when he sat down. I sat down using that same posture. Okay? Good old NLP things, and I really encourage y'all to learn. If you don't know that word. Thank you, NLP. I can say that. Okay. Says, okay, Teddy, even though you did something really foolish today, you are really still a good kid. Teddy's eyes gets wide. And he goes, even though you got really mad, you are a wonderful child. Teddy's eyes are getting wider. He's looking at me like, say what? Even though you got really upset at staff today, you know, you're a wonderful, super-duper child. And Teddy's, well, okay. Now, I didn't ask Teddy a SUDS level at that point. You know, it's pretty obvious, you know? So you scratch that step right off the bat. Okay? So, but it did seem to calm Teddy down, and I said, well, Teddy, if you were upset this much when I walked into the room, how upset are you now? If this is as upset as you get, and this is not upset at all. Okay? Teddy stares at me. I'm going, well, geez, you know, okay. This is as upset as you get. So tell you what, when I get my hands to the right position, you nod, okay? Teddy stares at me. I'm getting worried. Teddy nods. Ever been there? Okay. I said, wow, Teddy, this is really working great for you. Let's see if we can just calm it all the way down. Let's tap right here. So we run through the same sort of setup statements with him. And I go, let's see how much it calmed you down this time. I'm starting to get worried again. We get to here, and he goes, I said, wow, let's just calm this down all the way. I bet we can do it one more time. How old is Teddy? Teddy's 11. Or was 11. They grow older, you know. Sorry. Sometimes one of the real things that gets through to these kids is to state the obvious. Where was I? Okay, Teddy was about right here. We tap back through the thing, and I start saying, I'm thinking, yay, this is working so slow, so easy, so well, so quickly. I'll just see if I can't reach a little further here. So we tap for, even though I'm really upset, I'm still a good kid. Teddy nods, eyes wide, big brown eyes, cute kid. Even though I'm leaving here on Friday, and I'm scared about it, I'm a wonderful child. Even though I'm scared to death that my new family's not going to like me, I'm still a wonderful child. And Teddy just does this kind of like, okay? And before I could reach my hands out to say, again, you know, show me how much, Teddy puts his hands together and smiles. This child, who has wreaked havoc on the unit for 3 days, required a seclusion order, which we hate to do, you know, and is basically extremely anxious, is calm and smiling at me. He has not said a word. Forgot my place. Oh, I said, wow, this is really good for you, Teddy. He's still not talking. I said, staff tell me you don't want to go to school. Teddy, who was smiling at me, goes, Do you need more of the verbal thing about another aspect? I said, oh, well, can you tell me about that? Thinking he's probably not going to talk to me anyway, and I'll go back through having to make up something. But he did. He says, they tease me. What did they tease you about? So he told me. We talked a minute, maybe 50 words, and we go back through tapping. Even though the kids tease me at school, I'm a wonderful child. Go back through the same thing again. Again, it's about 3 times. Again, he's telling me how much. And by the end of the third thing, Teddy puts his hands together and he says, I want to go to ISS. Now, ISS is our in-school suspension. And one of our rules is that the child has to process with a staff person who had to place him in seclusion. We did that. We left the unit hand in hand. Teddy goes to school. Teddy's not a problem the rest of that day. He's not a problem in the rest of the unit the rest of that week. Okay. Did I cure Teddy of anything? No. Did I teach him one more kind of thing to use to deal with his upsets? Sure. And do it all the time. Teddy is a classic example of a no-talk kid. Many of these kids won't talk, or at least talk about feelings or their painful experiences in any sort of way. And many have very good reason. They've lived life as one failure right after the other. And you, as the therapist or the helper, are not the first person this child has refused to talk to. This child's been lectured to and talked to about his failures and his long list of sins long before they ever got to your office. So many of these kids won't talk and refuse to do anything an adult will want to do. Don said in his presentation earlier, I don't usually get much out of a kid. I go, gee, imagine that. Okay, that's not uncommon. Anybody else experience that? Okay. By the time they reach your office, there's been a long line of people telling them all their wrongdoings about what they should do, what they shouldn't do. They see you as one more in that list. Your job is to set yourself apart. Your job somehow is for them to see that you are in some way different. These children have layer upon layer of trauma, and EFT is a wonderful gift for quickly resolving one upset or issue at the time. But these kids have so many issues and are rarely patient or trusting. I'm working with training our staff at our program to use EFT on a daily basis with these children and to work it into part of our routine. I was talking to somebody who is running a treatment program about that, and that would be where you would want to start with. That's a part of your program. The best thing to do as soon as the child gets in from school or gets there first thing in the morning, to work the EFT in at that point. I continue to search for ways to reach these children, and one of the things that I've started using in the last couple of months or so is the Cook's Hookup. Y'all familiar with that? You can do this kind of number. Everybody know this one? Well, good. Yeah, okay. Somehow or the other, kids, and that matter adults too, see themselves as tying themselves up in a pretzel is not quite as weird as tapping. I haven't figured that one out yet. But that it does seem to calm the child down. It does seem to help balance the energy. It does seem to make it more readily available, the child more available and open to the EFT. Respect and dignity and admiring their courage. In my 30 years as a social worker and in this field with a variety of placement kinds of jobs, I've met lots of caring, concerned, empathetic, even sympathetic therapists. But they don't seem to really focus in on the respect piece of that. It's almost as if they feel sorry for the child, and they're not really tuned in to the critical piece of respect in that child for who he is, no matter what it is that he has done. Not all of these multi-problem children come to residential placements such as ours. Many with only slightly less problems are in your school or your program or your mental health situation. Meeting these kids on their own terms really seems to be difficult for many adults. You have to like the kid, and many of these children work at being unlovable, unlikable, and unreachable. And on top of that, we have our own childhood issues to deal with, which is another good reason for continuing to work on your own stuff. I recommend that you tap before you see a session with a kid that you're feeling uncomfortable with. Because if you're uncomfortable in that environment with that child, you don't stand a prayer of being congruently who you are, with being totally in the here and now, with being totally non-judgmental. Respecting their world and respecting their choices is critical. You want that child to get the message, she likes me, so I must be likable.
Any chance of including some comments when you're the parent?
The parent? Well, I'm really don't see parents really respecting their children. Hey, go to Walmart. Had a friend whose father said, well, come on, let's go down to Walmart. And he says, no, I don't want to do that. He's kind of a smart teenager. He says, no, I don't want to do that. He says, Dad, he says, where did people abuse their kids before there was a Walmart? Respect and dignity is about acceptance. So for the parent to accept that this wonderful human being, with all of his problems and all of his limitations, is perfect just as he is the message you want to get across to him. Even those statements, your setups, are the ultimate in acceptance. Reach over and shake the hand of your neighbor. Where's your fingers touch? Am I the only person who thought of that?
I think so, Ann.
Must be. I introduce it to the kids in this sort of way. I shake their hand and say, this is the friendly spot. This is when you shake hands with somebody and say, you're friendly. This was initiated to show I don't have a gun, a knife, a weapon in my hands. And with some of these kids who are used to that sort of thing, they really relate to that part. I explained that the setup is similar to shaking hands. It's a spot we touch during shaking hands to show that, we're friendly. It's also the way that, using EFT, we introduce ourselves to another part of ourselves. Like, hello part, I see you, I accept you, I'm still okay. I have this problem, and I'm okay. We talk about fighting with ourselves. Our children understand fighting. 87% of the children in residential care in the state of Georgia have violent, aggressive behavior as part of their history. They understand fighting. They understand about fighting with themselves. So I say this is a way that you don't have to fight with yourself anymore. It keeps us from fighting with our parts. And once I explain this situation like that to the child, they have much less problem with setups. Because an awful lot of children, I don't use the setups with at all, because that's sort of so far outside of what their experience is and what it is that they're interested in doing, that bridging the gap sort of thing. You've got to tie it into what's within their realm of understanding. These children are totally in the here and now. They live very egocentrically in the present, and they have no ability to delay gratification. So they exhibit those aggressive, repetitive, negative behaviors that wear staff and parents down. These are not children whose behavior is going to turn around with the right setup statement, or your one-minute wonders, which is going to turn their lives around. These are difficult, complex, multi-layered, issued children. These are not children who've had the experience of a caring adult labeling their inner emotional world. They've not learned to describe or even recognize the feelings that they've gone. They feel, they act, they see, they act. Nordrina's a classic example. Nordrina's about yay high, 10 years old, adorable African-American child, bright little girl for our facility. We don't get any really high IQs in our facility, but an average, bright little girl. And sweet as she can be, maybe 5 minutes a week. She is a textbook case of a here and now child. She's a textbook case of a spoiled brat. Only Nordrina didn't have the privilege of being spoiled. Nordrina knew nothing but violence and aggression and abuse and neglect. I've tapped many times with Nordrina once she started attacking people, only to see her go off in the next 10, 15 minutes. It's going to take that repetitive, over and over kinds of things. And with Nordrina, she's not exactly what you'd call a cooperative child. Little Chris is a fetal alcohol syndrome child. He is capable of screaming for hours. And he will not be consoled. He attacks you if you come close. I can use EFT with him, or one of the staff can, once he calms down a little bit. Over and over. Often in our quest to get these children to open up and talk to us, we forget they really don't know how. They may not recognize their feelings. They may not be able to put their feelings into words, and they may not even understand the meaning of what it is that they're feeling in the first place. They simply are unable to make sense of their internal experiences. And part of our job in that establishing rapport is to help them in labeling those feelings and making sense out of what's going on inside of them. And it's pretty complex stuff because they can have compounding, what's the word I'm looking for? Conflicting feelings going on at the same time. Often these kids have no vocabulary to make sense of what's going on inside of them. You're not always going to know what happens either. So you have to kind of let go of that need to know. Child therapists are used to deal with more ambiguity than the rest of the therapeutic population. In fact, many times a veterinarian's got more knowledge about what's going on with their client than we do with our kids. Kelly's another classic example of a no-talk child. Kelly was terrified of going to court. Now, Kelly's this big, awkward, 15-year-old, not exactly what you'd call attractive kind of kid with buck teeth that nobody had bothered to fix till he came to our program. He was your basic North Georgia backwoods hills kind of person. His family sat on the porch and talked about, whose ass they were going to whoop that week. Kelly was going to court because Kelly had hit a kid at school, and the kid's parents filed charges. Kelly was not getting much sympathy on the unit or in school because Kelly was not taking any responsibility for what it was that he had done. They deserved it. Kid shouldn't have hit me. Like, this was a girl that Kelly had hit. About yay high, as a matter of fact. Kelly had very poor attitudes about women. He basically considered us female types inferior to him. So he was pretty angry that everybody was doing this to him, and he felt righteously indignant that he had done what needed to have happened. So he's sitting on the unit. When I walk in, he's sitting there at the table with kind of a long look with his hands like this on the table. We have benches in front of the tables instead of chairs. And the kids, you know how adults, they'll sit down on this thing and they'll sort of scoot around. The kids do this kind of number. So I go on the unit, Kelly's sitting there, and so I do this kind of number. Sit on the bench facing him, put my hands on the bench just like Kelly had his. So I understand you're going to court tomorrow, Kelly. Yep. These no-talk kids, you get a lot of real classic conversations. I said, understand, judge can send you back to detention. Now, why would I start with such a statement here? I'm supposed to be this empathetic person, right? Okay, number one, Kelly knew me while he had not been agreeable to doing EFT in any sort of other way. He knew who I was. He knew that's what I did, okay? I also had done my homework and talked with the staff people. I talked with the other people around, read the last few case notes. You know, what I wanted to do was hit this kid right at where his anxiety was. So I say, hey, understand the judge can send you back to detention. Now, if this kid was anxious to begin with, what do you think my comment did? Okay? It's a little manipulative, I suppose. But when these children are anxious, that is your very best, easiest time to get them to tap. Particularly your adolescents. Because your adolescents as a group don't really want to do this, at least so far in my experience. But if they're anxious, they're a whole lot more open to trying something than they are if they're angry or even depressed. So my intent was to increase his anxiety level. He says, yep, I hate that place. Oh, okay. I said, so, but the judge might could send you back. I said, you know, I got this way. You'll know what's coming. You know, I got this way that might help you make a better impression on that judge. And if you make a better impression on that judge, he might treat you a little better. What? Well, tap right here. Now with Kelly, who number one didn't have a high opinion of females in the first place, and was extremely anxious and not very verbal and not too bright, I skipped the setup statements entirely. So we tap right here, and we go through, I love this, you can stand up here and just calm your own self down while you're making a presentation. Okay? We go through this process. I even did the 9 gamut with him, thinking I'm skipping the setup statements. He's really high anxiety. He probably will follow me anyway. So we even did the 9 gamut. And I forgot what the song was he chose to hum, but one of those rock things that is sort of out of our adult hearing level, I think. When we were through, Kelly says, guess I shouldn't have hit her. That's right, Kelly. I didn't say that. In the here and now, non-judgmental, you know, I'm sitting there in awe that this child, who was so adamant that he had been done wrong and this was a setup job, admitted any responsibility at all. I tried to contain my enthusiasm. With kids like Teddy, you know, you can be as enthusiastic and should be as possible. Those got to be rough, tough adolescent types. Enthusiasm not always where you want to go. But he says, I don't know. He says, I don't want to go. Well, I guess that they send me. He said, I've been there before. Yeah, Kelly, about 3 times. But he says, so I know what to do to get out soon. It's a good plan, Kelly. Which is about all I said. I said, well, that's a good plan, Kelly. You know, good luck. I took myself off of the bench and said, good luck. Ran into him in the hallway just before his therapist was going to take him to court. I says, Kelly, you still kind of concerned about going to court? Now, this child would have died before he told you he was afraid of anything. He says, yeah, he says, I'm not sure what the judge is going to do, but he says, I guess it'll be okay. He says, I know I was wrong to hit her. I says, I understand everybody's upset. I said, that sounds like a good thing to say to the judge, Kelly. I sure wish you luck. Well, he did, and this is quite a speech for this child now. So this is what he did say to the judge. He came back, and I guess a couple of months later left our program. About 3 or 4 months after that, we sort of lost touch with him, which is what sometimes happens. These families move so much. But to the best of my knowledge, he had not hit another child since then. So don't be afraid that you're going to take their appropriate guilt away. EFT does not make these children stupid or irresponsible. Kelly was not feeling responsible, was not feeling guilty, and was not taking responsibility. But again, always take a chance on doing it with them when they're really anxious. That's probably one of your easiest ends with EFT. You know, our positive regard is much more shown to these kids in what we do than in what we say. Remember that 7% of the message is in our words? But our words can also turn a child off if they're judgmental or critical. You can lose that kid, he tunes you out. These kids have finely tuned antenna for criticism and rejection. They know what that looks like. They don't always know how to read warmth and caring and empathy. And that's where our keeping on is so important. We have to be in touch with that child inside of us. You know, memories of our own childhood guide us more than we realize. Keep in mind, and think back to your own childhood, many of those intimate family moments, many of those memories of our lives, there wasn't much talking in that interaction. A lot can be done when the child is, you are there congruently with that child. Sometimes with kids like Kelly, I teach them the touch and breathe thing. Some kids seem to be much more open to that than the actual tapping. The more ways we know how to modify these techniques with these kids, the better off that we are, because we'll have even more tools in our toolbox with that. You know, I use a lot of fun. With Teddy, for instance, you know, all the hoopla about how wonderful that was. With Kelly, I was much more careful because he's an older adolescent male and had already been very resistant to doing the EFT process. So, I mean, that was an amazing feat to have even gotten this child to do that. With the younger kids, I'll use, you know, the monkey spot. They like that. Do this kind of number. Or we do Simon Says touch here. I love the points with, was it Alan talking about the seven magic spots? Fun is a critical element in dealing with these kids. They got serious problems, and it's important that we treat those seriously. But a sense of humor and some fun in it is a meaningful sort of thing too. Fun is a real intervention with these kids. It's also real important to advocate for these children. They have to believe that you are in their corner. Remember, your key job is to set yourself apart from all those other adults in his life that have been giving him those long lists of their 7 deadly sins. In fact, that's what they call it in juvenile court in Georgia, the 7 deadly sins that can get you automatically into detention. We have in my place what we call child advocate forms. This is this little letter to the editor that the child can do when they're unhappy about something. And these kids are unhappy about lots of things. They complain about the food, they complain about their roommate, they complain about the activities, and their favorite thing to complain about is staff. Now, we have some pretty good staff, and we really train them pretty well. So these children are not at all mistreated. Just before I left the program, a kid named Alan had written a child advocate form. Alan's another adolescent male who's refusing to do EFT. Alan had said that he got a color drop. We have this level system with these color-coded things and the consequences and the rewards and the whole behavioral milieu sort of thing. He says that the staff gave him a color drop that he shouldn't have made him do what he refused to do. Well, it took about 20 minutes to figure out what in the heck actually did happen, and had set Alan down with the staff person, because most of the time it's because the kid misinterpreted what the staff meant, or the staff misinterpreted what the kid meant, or the kid just got mad, and so I'm going to tell on you and get you fired sort of thing. We get a lot of that. So generally having the child and the staff person sitting there, you work it out really quickly and saves a lot of time. This time, however, it was very clear the staff member shouldn't have done that. So I looked over at Alan and said, you know, Alan, you know something? I agree with you. They shouldn't have done that. You shouldn't have gotten a color drop for that. I said, and I really appreciate you bringing this to my attention because it shows to me that we have a training need with our staff. And I turned to the assistant cottage leader who was standing there. I said, and your assistant cottage leader is going to make sure that all the staff in your unit are now trained in that and that this will not happen again. And I'll discuss this with our campus trainer, and we'll make sure that the training for your new staff so that everybody knows this. And so Alan's sort of staring at me, and the staff's going, you know, oh my goodness. I said, but Alan, have I ever told you my 5 secrets about staff? And Alan's going, oh. I said, well, number 1, some staff are better than others. Now this never fails to get the kid. They can't believe I said something like that. Okay, but is that negative? You know, these children have heard platitudes their whole life. You know, we all care about you. We just want the best for you. Blah, 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 blah. You know, they've heard blah, 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 blah. You know, they tune it out. They just don't even hear it anymore. Okay, number 1, some staff are better than others. Number 2, even the best staff are better on some days than other days. Number 3, you can learn something from every single staff person, even if what you learn is something about how you don't want to be. Number 4, you control what you learn and what you take in good from staff and what you reject from the staff. That's up to you. And number 5 secret is there are no perfect people. Not me, not you, not them. This is basic reality, these kids, and they love it. They can't believe that as campus director, I haven't sat there and defended the staff. Now, did I say anything disrespectful? Did I say anything untrue? Did I even say anything negative? They're very, very defensive. They're very, very on their guard, so I don't give them anything to get defensive about. And they pretty much can't believe that I've said that. The message is, I'm somebody different. The 5 secrets are absolutely outrageous to these kids, but it's about real life and real stuff and respecting that they got the sense to tell the difference. It's about respect. It's about acceptance. Now, is Alan going to do EFT? I don't know. Do I stand a better chance the next time he's upset? Absolutely. Christina's another case in point. I do a weight loss group with the adolescents, which has just been a hoot. And Christina's one of those. She's about 15, big girl. In fact, we tap on what their body image is, and her little image was an overfed baby, which for Christina is a great deal of insight. Then had Christina also visualize when she's going to use EFT, which is another thing. I use visualization with these kids a lot, and most of them, occasionally you'll have a child who can't visualize, and I'll be interested in trying the joy of learning technique in teaching the kids how to visualize. And as an aside, there are 3 books I'd recommend that you work with children with that you buy. One of them is Don Blackerby's Joy of Learning. We've started using that within our program probably just a couple of months ago, and are finding it, you know, the staff are accepting of it, the children like it, and are really excited about the potential for that. The Joy of Learning. The second book is one that I also have just learned about, that I've read and have not yet started with, but makes so much sense. It's called The Gift of Dyslexia, and I think it's Davis. Ron Davis. And he talks about that dyslexia is a learned disorientation process, and he describes in the book how to shift that around. And the third book is a book that's a little way out. It's a little way out for me as these conservative administrator type, but it's called The Indigo Child. Not way out for y'all. Little stretch for me.
Read it though.
Oh yeah, I gave it to my niece who got an indigo child. Got to be an indigo child. Yeah, some really good things in there about how to deal with difficult children. So whether you buy into the aura thing or not, it still has got some really helpful stuff in there. Okay, they just got the time for a break sort of thing. I have a dream that every child should know how to self-calm, that this is a technique that really could help much of the problems within our school systems with our kids. And this empowers the children in a world that gives children basically very little power, which is one of the things that I work very hard at doing, is to empower the children. I've been asked several times about, do I do surrogate tapping? You know, usually no. In fact, rarely. I've done it maybe twice. Because my whole point is that this is an empowerment to that child. My whole point is that this is something that the child decides on his own to do, to take, to be into his being. You know, we can jump the gun with not and miss our chance to empower the child. And I guess to me, and it's not that there's anything wrong with surrogate tapping, don't get me wrong about that. And I encourage you to do that if there's situations in which that would be effective in decreasing the pain of that child. But the point is to empower the child. The point is that the child takes in this as a self-calming kind of technique. I'd like to take a few minutes and take some questions now, if y'all have got some.
I've had a couple of situations with kids and numbers of different issues, but what it comes down to when we meet with the parents is the parents need to be doing the work. And I know that the kids you're around are sometimes...
Wait a minute, the parents need to be doing what work?
The tapping, it comes down to that the children's issues, the children are clear. It ends up coming down when we're meeting with the parents, you know, and we have all the faculty and a lot of the issues that come up with incredible, it's the parents, and it's not the kids at all. Kids actually a lot more simple than we get with the parents, and I haven't found a way to breach that quite easily and with the parents, and I don't, I know lots of situations, most of the situations I think are approachable through the kids themselves that I deal with, but a couple of times it's really been, the kids are clear, the parents are the issue.
It's still about respecting their behavior no matter what that behavior is, and that goes for parents too. You know, I believe that not just kids, but everybody does the best that they can do. It's about bridging where the parent is with their lives, and what is it that hooks that parent in, what got them into your office in the first place, and to somehow tie that into something that their interest is. Yeah.
I'm curious to know what your take is on autism, and if you've ever worked with any autistic children.
We have 2 autistic children in our program. What my take is on it, gosh, if I knew that, I'd be paid for coming here. But as far as the EFT part, again, when you can get the child to follow, they'll do it, but it doesn't seem to shift much of the static thing. And it's with those children that I really am interested in looking at a lot of the other aspects of things too. But again, I'm trying to get the staff at this point to fit the EFT into the daily milieu of our program so that over time those sorts of things come down. But to a large degree, of course, those children are not available to you. Yes, ma'am?
That was actually kind of my question, was how much the staff was welcoming it. Did they just welcome it with open arms? Or?
No.
No.
And even though I'm the administrator of the agency, you know, one of my secrets about the administrators is that how much you as the therapist are in essence got a freedom to operate within certain parameters of what it is you do, and I'll touch on that a little bit in the institutional spiel. Some staff, of course, did, and they're using it to some degree with the kids, but it's a slow sort of thing, introducing it, even if you've got that administrator in charge of it. If you don't mind, I can save all that discussion till the institutional thing. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
Because so many of the people that you have are in their teens and they've gone past many of the vaccination stages. Are they still getting vaccinations? Have you noticed any changes because of it, if you've seen it?
No. I'm not seeing that at all. We're mandated by the state of Georgia to have that they have certain shots. But whether that ties into any of their behavior or not, there's no obvious evidence. And again, even if it did, there's so much else going on in these children's lives. You know, we don't get the concerned parent who brings their ADD child to us because they're not getting along well in school. Okay? We get your multi-traumatized, multi-diagnosed, multi-problematic, aggressive, zilch insight. It's not that and children without concerned, committed parents are at the highest risk of all. And we usually get either no parent or a parent with no skills. So the fact that whether a immunization had an impact on this would be lost in all of that, which is part of what makes us all different. I mean, so complex. Anybody else? Okay. Now, EFT will not eliminate the need to teach new skills, to practice problem solving, to give that child that acceptance and attention. We practice dealing with their problem stuff, just like with Christina and Mrs. Barton. You know, even though Mrs. Barton drives me nuts, or Miss Amy was unfair to me, sort of thing. And then we problem solve. These children have such poor social skills. You can't learn very much social skills if you've not had much practice in socializing. If you didn't have your emotions labeled from day one and some sort of caring and concern with that, you don't have the practice in having social skills. You know, that's a learning. That's something that takes a lot of practice. So the piece that I always, always, always add into it is that once you've resolved what that issue is, you problem solve with that child around that issue. You know, what can you learn from this? How do you solve the situation? What can you do differently? I visualize them practicing the EFT, tie it into an event that they're doing that day. You know, okay, when are you going to practice EFT? You know, and I get them to picture good old NLP stuff again. I get them to picture waking up in the morning and running through the sequence, or doing it like right after they take their shower, or when they first get home from school, whatever it is that they've said that they wanted to do. When I work with a child on those kinds of issues, generally their intensity goes down to zero pretty quickly. When it doesn't, I ask that infamous question, you know, who else in your life have you, remind you of Miss Barton or Miss Amy? You know, what other situation have you been in that you felt like this? You know, can you name me another time? We go back to that and we tap for that situation, take that intensity down. And usually, if that happens, what happens is that Miss Barton or Miss Amy, it's not any big deal. We problem solve how to deal with Miss Amy. I tell them my 5 secrets about dealing with staff. Now in Christina's case, I kind of forgot about the situation we had tapped for, and it actually was a couple of months later. Now this child had been complaining about Miss Barton now for about 3 months. It was about like the 5th child advocate form that I'd gotten that had led us to do that tapping sequence. So this was an ongoing sort of thing. I asked her how she and Miss Barton were doing, and she says, oh, She says, when she sounds rude, I just figure she's having a bad day, and I do what she asks and get out of her way. You know, she'll be out of our program soon with that sort of attitude. Okay. Many of these children work hard, though, at being unlovable and unlikable. You know, in these cases, you really have to get yourself out of the way. You really have to live totally in that present. Remember, judgment is a history thing. You know, you can't worry about what's going to happen next or even evaluating each move as you go. Just relax. Be aware of only what it's like to be with this child right now. Such was the case with Tanya. Tanya was my 315-pound little 12-year-old. Tanya had gotten into an argument with her mother, gotten herself all upset. This is a very large child who came to our program from the Department of Juvenile Justice after she had badly beaten up a boy at school. I don't know why the kid wanted to mess with her, personally. Yeah, that was right. So I had been told that Tanya had been placed on suicide precautions after she'd gotten all upset and tearing all around the unit and huffing and puffing and carrying on and saying that, you know, she was just going to kill herself. Now we take, with our population, we take the comment, I'm going to kill myself, pretty seriously. And the kids learn that not only is it not fun to be on suicide precaution, you know, that is something that takes immediate reaction from the staff. So they learn not to use that fairly quickly as a manipulative sort of thing. You know, we protect them, but we make it boring, I guess would be the term. And while they do get lots of one-on-one, in fact, a child by definition on suicide precaution is documented on like every 15 minutes. And if they're in really bad situation, they basically are on staff eyesight and are never left there. But she was calmer, and the staff had let her go into her room to take a nap. So when I walk on the unit, they tell me she's in there taking a nap. So I walk in the room, and here is Tanya, this big, gawky kid, curled up in her bed with this teddy bear. A teddy bear. Okay? She's a little girl. My heart kind of goes out to this kid who's wreaked havoc also on the unit for the whole day before. And I had come kind of stomping in the room to make sure that she'd be awake. And I leaned up against the window and sort of curled my body again. And it's a very effective thing to match your body with what the child is doing. In the way she did, and I used my usual highly skilled, deeply therapeutic comment, "Hi." Tanya turns over and she glares at me. And I decided at this point, sometimes I do glare back at them, but in this particular instance, I just rolled with it and said to her, "You know, I sleep with my teddy bear too," which is true, sort of. Actually, I have this really cute little green teddy bear. Green, yeah. My niece came to visit me one day, and I'm playing with this little teddy bear. She says, "Ann, you're having entirely too much fun with this teddy bear." So I work with kids, remember. You get away with those sorts of behaviors when you work with kids. Anyway, so Tanya turns over and sort of her face softens when I said that. And I said, "Well, how'd you get yourself on suicide precautions?" Because I want to get, again, I don't have long. As a campus administrator, you know, I really don't have long with this. I tend to, you know, get into right there on the issue. Well, how'd you get into suicide precautions? My mother got upset with my mother. So I said, "Yeah, I heard about the conversation." I said, "What was it, the thing that you said, that she said, that upset you the most?" Again, I'm hitting straight to the point. Once you've got that rapport, you can go for it. She says, she told me I just have to deal with it, that I was trying to control her life. I said, "Well, Tanya, you know this really neat way that sometimes I teach adults, that I teach adults to calm down quickly." I said, "Sometimes I use it with kids too. I guess you're old enough." I never said I wasn't manipulative. Manipulation gets a bad name, you know? You know, it's about being creative. It's about being right there. It's about letting that stuff just come up. I mean, I probably consciously couldn't have thought of that. But just sort of, boop, there it was. Because you're trying to bridge, again, something that's going to get you and her, in this case, you know, on the same wavelength. So Tanya goes, what is it? These kids are always so pleasant. I said, well, are you game? You know, it is sort of strange. It's like a relaxation exercise. I didn't really wait for an answer. I just started tapping on the side of my hand. And she sort of looks at me questioningly like, say what? I get a lot of say what kind of looks. I said, Tanya, how much less trouble would you get into if you could calm yourself down anytime you wanted to? She goes, a lot. No. I said, well, this will teach you a way that'll calm yourself down anytime you choose to. Okay, what am I doing again? That empowerment. You're always going for that empowerment. This is about her, even if I was manipulative. Okay? So we go through the process. Even though I got upset at my mother on the phone, I'm still a good kid. Now, did Tanya say that? No. I'm sitting there saying that, which happens most of the time. Most of the time, I'm the one saying it. Rarely do I get a child who follows with it. And in fact, it's happened so much, I've about quit telling or making any point of it. I just say, you know, you can repeat after me if you want to. And either they do or they don't. Most of the time they don't, not in my place. Now, with a more, quote, normal population, whatever that is, you know, you may very well have them follow with that. And I think it's an excellent method to get, again, deeper, them to own it, and that empowerment of that child. So we tap for, even though I got upset at my mother, I'm still a good kid. Even though, you know, I have to deal with my mother's choices, I'm still a good kid. You know, even though my mother thinks I control her life, I'm having enough trouble controlling mine, you know, I'm still a good kid. I asked her to rate then how upset she was from 0 to 10. I actually don't get a suds the first time, most of the time. Usually, when I get there, the kid's upset. So if I ask at all, and I don't even always ask. Sometimes when I say, well, how upset are you about? They go, a lot. Well, you know, what do you want? You know, remember somebody was talking about, you know, how useful was math to you in your life. You don't have to have a number. You know, and if they go, well, I'm better, okay. And then you tap through it again, you know, well, how does it feel now? Well, it's almost gone. So you don't always even have to get a number. I don't always even insist on a number. Okay, Tanya goes down to 0 on that situation. Now, lots of the emails I get are about, you know, what setup phrase did I use, or what was the right words with this, or, you know, do I change this around? You know, and my point to y'all tonight is, it don't matter. What you're looking for is to get over the fact that to that child, that you respect them, that you admire their courage. It's about being in the here and now. It's about being creative with your approaches. How many of y'all think you're creative? Well, we got most of the hands anyway. Okay, do we need a tap for, even though I don't think I'm creative? Or as creative as I could be? Okay. Now, lots of times I plug in a forgiveness step. Little Sarah, one of our resident highly complaining teenagers, she's 14. She complains about everything, and what she's not complaining about, she was whining about. She came home from school one day and said this kid had grabbed her boob, and he did it on purpose. Well, it wasn't the first time that Sarah's made this big deal out of nothing or even lied about things. So the staff were sort of said, well, that's too bad, and put her back into the milieu doing what it is that you do, but dutifully they reported it, and I went over to investigate. I had talked to another child before I got to her, and the teacher, who also had seen the situation. The kid basically tripped over his own feet in the hall and fell up against her. So we go into there, and so we start tapping for Sarah, and I have tapped lots of times. You know, even though this kid grabbed at my boob, you know, I'm a worthwhile person, he shouldn't have done that kind of thing. We get down to the zero with that, and I added in at that point the forgiveness step. And basically the forgiveness step, I use the finger points. And in the handout, you know, what I tell them, that this is the forgiveness finger and this is the angry finger. And whether that is real or not, I don't know. Like I said, I'm not beyond being manipulative. It works really well. The kids like it. I see the kids sometimes walking across the campus tapping on his angry finger. Hey, whatever works. And that is the key to it, is whatever works. Okay? Even though, you know, no, we're doing the forgiveness stuff. Okay? You know, I forgive myself. I'm doing the best I can. Now, usually the first time they say that, it's just really, really awkward to them. But by the second time, they're really starting getting into it and nodding their head. It, again, is an acceptance sort of thing. You know, I forgive myself. I'm doing the best I can. And then we get to the angry finger. And I forgive Jerry. He was just being a total jerk. They love that one. You know, again, to use the child terminology with that. You know, I forgive Jeremy. He was just being a jerk. We talked some after we tapped with Tanya about how she was doing on the unit. We processed again with her, you know, and she was smiling, laughing, cutting up, talking to the staff, and crayons, coloring in things. When kids are on suicide precaution, they get crayons. They don't get pens or pencils or such. And I wrote that up for the EFT list. And now, here's the rest of the story. About 2 hours later, they called and says, you know, would you say to Tanya that calmed her down? So I went over what we had discussed and that she had calmed all down. I said, why? What's going on? They said, well, she's getting upset about something. I said, well, you want me to come over there and try it again? You know, no, I think we got it handled. An hour later, they've called the police on Tanya. Tanya is, so I don't know, I will regret to my dying, well, that's a little too strong, I've tapped for it, but I still regret that I did not go over to the unit and process again with this child, because again, these kids have got a whole nose full of bees. You know, while you can calm them down about one sort of situation, there's something else always that comes up. And unless you can follow them around all day and tap with them, Tanya ended up, the police came, escorted her to our timeout room. It takes more than being upset in a place to get sent to, a child to be sent to jail in Georgia. It takes an awful lot, as a matter of fact, 7 deadly sins. And I authorized for them to put her mattress in the timeout room for her to spend the night, because she had threatened staff. She had grabbed something that could have possibly hurt the staff. This is a child who had a history of that level of aggression. You know, it's a safety thing. Our #1 goal in my facility is to keep everybody safe, the kids, the staff, the facility. Tanya by then was somewhat calm, and it was like, I guess 7:30 then. It's still a little early to go to bed. And I am really keen on that a child in seclusion or isolation, or even in their being sent to their room, they're not learning anything. So I said that if she was calm enough that she could have one activity of her choice, and she chose to get a book that, you know, would be a safe thing. So we let her have her book to read, and as they were bringing it to her, I wrote down a little cheat sheet of EFT, folded it up in a piece of paper, and put it in her book, and gave her the book and said, what we did this afternoon is in this piece of paper on the book. You know, if you're calm enough to do it, it might help you feel better, or some such statement. Went on the unit the next morning, and Tanya was sitting again on the unit because you can't go off to that degree and still go straight on to school until somebody evaluates you. And so I sat down and talked to Tanya. The first thing she said to me was, "I tapped this morning." Yes! You know, these kids are so difficult and so, it can be very discouraging and very draining. So you take your happinesses where you can. I then told Tanya my 5 secrets about staff and really emphasized with her the one that you choose what good things you take from staff and which things you reject from staff. Because for Tanya, it's all about control. So to do anything to empower this child, you know, would be very important. Tanya's actually become one of my very bestest tapper people and is teaching it to the other kids and is actually spreading more of the milieu. Because while I make an attempt to teach it to every child as a part of their program when they first come in, I don't always have time. You know, I'm basically trying to build support and help it spread, and because it's not going to happen if it's just me. So I'm not only trying to empower the child to use these techniques, I'm trying to empower the staff that this is something else that you can do to help these kids.